All right, here we are in episode 3 of our Geometry Dash inspired video game. We haven't brought in any artwork yet. All we can do is move our character left and right, and our camera is following. So, first off, before we get into the jump portion of the coding, notice when I created that script on my player, it did create the asset. So that was our first asset creation. I'm going to make a new asset right now. I'm going to right click and you see a lot of options. We're going to go up to create and a lot more options, and we're going to go all the way down to material. Now, material is basically a great, quick, and easy way to color and kind of control how things look on our screen with basic shapes. So I'm just going to call this my ground color, my ground material here, and I'm going to go over. I'm going to change the color of it, and I'm just going to go. I'm just going to go with a hard black actually here for now. So when we're prototyping and creating a game, again, keeping things really simple. So now I have this black material, and I'm just going to drag it and place it on my ground. I could place it up here on the ground, or sorry, on the ground object, but it's easier just right in my scene. So now I have a black ground, and if I wanted to, I could also right-click and create another material and change the color of my player. But I'm just going to leave the player white for now. That seems to work. So right now in my scene, I have my player, I have one piece of ground, and now we're going to implement a basic jump. Now, before I do the jump, I do want to move this over a little bit, kind of get our start right there. And I'm going to show you a great way to create more ground. So actually, we're going to hold off on that. Actually, I know why. We're going to hold off on that for now. We're just going to leave it with just this one platform before we start. Before we do any more ground, actually, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Okay, so how are we going to make our character jump? So we're going to go to the script and we're going to need another input. Now, our input for jumping, oh, sorry, that's not our script. That's a different script. Hold on, let's get the right script open here. We're going to go to our player and double click on player controller script, and here, now it'll open up. In just a second here. Okay. Now, we are going to first create a variable. We need a variable that just like we had move input and move speed, something to control the speed, we need something to control the jump power. And again, we're going to make this one public. So we're going to make another public float. Remember, float is just a decimal number. And we're going to call this jump power. Again, naming it lowercase for our variables. Not like when we're naming objects or scripts. We start with a lowercase value on when we name variables, and then uppercase for the second word with no space. So lowercase jump, uppercase power. And we're going to let's default that to, I have no idea. We'll just default it to 4 for now. We'll see how this turns out. Okay, and that with a semicolon. So now I have a variable of jumping power. I made it public, so I'll be able to edit it. We'll see if 4 works. Probably won't. We'll find out. Okay, so now how are we going to use this? Well, we're going to do something similar to this RB velocity, but we're going to do our very first if statement because we only want to jump if the player hits the jump button. And for us, that's going to be the space bar. Okay, so we are going to add another line of code in the update, and we're going to create an if statement. Now, if statements are very simple. It is a logic check inside these brackets that if it returns true in that update, it will run whatever code I want it to run. So we're going to check for the input of the spacebar being clicked, or pushed down, I should say. Input dot get. And now this time, instead of access, we're going to do get button down. Okay, so we're going to use get button down. Now there's get button, there's get button up, there's get button down. It can seem a little bit confusing, but this is going to work just fine for what we're doing. We actually can just leave it as get button for what we're going to do. Okay, so we're going to do get button. And now what button do we want? We're going to put that in brackets, and it's called well, for this, we're going to be using the jump key, which is we're going to put in the text. Okay, so we're getting the get button jump. Now, again, you have to spell this with capital J perfectly or else this will not work. And so now all this is doing is the if statement is going to check, is the space bar or the jump button, so this would work if we plugged in a controller and it's been configured with a jump button already. We're going to then add a curly brace, which is near the letter P if you don't use those very often, and press enter, and it's going to move it down a line. So now we can put our code. What do I want to happen if the jump button is pressed? Again, typing in these commands, these are set up in the input settings by default in Unity. That's where these are coming from. If I can't just I can't come up with any name I want to. Okay, so now we're going to do something really similar with this line of code. Now, working smarter, not harder, I'm going to just double click here, Control C, and go up here and Control V. I'm going to paste this in. Now, I need to modify it. I do not want this to control the movement left, right on the X portion of this vector. So I am going to take the RB dot velocity and I'm just going to keep the X value, whatever it is. So this allows us actually to have air control in our jump currently. I know later we're not going to have that with the geometry dash because we're going to have an auto run. But now over here, I don't want to just use the current Y velocity of the rigid body. I'm going to set this, I'm going to multiply it, I'm going to set it to our jump power. Okay, there we go. That's all we need to do. And now in the game, we should be able to jump. Now remember, this asterisk is up here. We got to press Control S to save our code. Let's go back into Unity. Let it reload. It's going to show the jump power over here in our inspector on our player. And we'll see how this looks. I guarantee we're going to need to tweak it, but this is where you get a lot of freedom in how we now control our basic jump. And there's going to be a couple problems, and I'll show you how to fix that. So as soon as this loads, we'll be able to get going. It's so close. Here we go. All right, so let's game test this. So you can see my jump power is set at 4. Let's test it. Let's see how good this jump looks. I'm not very confident. So here we go. I'm moving left and right. Okay, at a speed of 10. If I jump, okay, that's not very, oh, and look at that. I can multi-jump. I can jump and jump and jump. It's kind of like Floppy Bird where I can just jump as many times as I want, which is not something we want. We're going to be fixing that for sure. And I knew this was going to happen, and I'm going to show you how we do something called a ground check. So also, I don't like this jump right now. So let's get our jump where we want it before we do a ground check. So we're going to play around over here. And we're going to play around with 2 numbers. Now, jumping power is great. I do want a bigger jump. Let's set that to 10. And that's a bit too much. Let's set that maybe down to, I don't know, let's try 7. Okay, I don't mind the height of that jump. Okay, now it's really floaty. It's following the normal physics. If you were to kick a soccer ball in the air, it does follow this path, and I can move left and right, and I can jump. But in a video game, we want a snappier jump, and there's an easy way to do this. There's several ways, but the way we're going to do it, we're going to open up the rigid body, and we're going to change the gravity scale. We're going to jack up the gravity by, let's try 3. And now I have a bit more of a snappy jump. You can see that as I'm clicking the space bar. I'm going to put that up to 5 and see. Okay, too much gravity, but I can also bring up my jump power. Let's bring that up to 15 maybe. Now this is about how snappy you want your jump. Like I'm liking this jump currently. Again, I can double jump, but we're going to fix that in a second. Maybe my jump power is a little bit. And you're going to tweak this, especially once you start to do your level design, because you want to figure out, okay, what's the maximum height I want for my player to jump, and make sure it's consistent for the obstacles they need to jump over and avoid. So this is all about you and your player control. I'm going to try, so I'm going to remember these numbers, gravity scale 5, jumping power 14. I might tweak these more later, but 5 and 14 is what I'm going to do, because when I get out of play mode, those numbers are gone, so I'm going to change this back to 5. Jumping power, I'm going to put that to 14, and I'm happy with it. Okay, we got to jump, but we have infinite jump. We don't want infinite jump. We don't even want a double jump right now. We just want a single jump. How do we do that? Well, we're going to need to create a new child on our player first, and it's called a ground check. So I'm going to click on the player. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to create empty. Okay, that creates an empty child down here, and we're going to call this the ground check. Okay, and I'm going to click on that ground check, and I'm going to press F to zoom in on it. And we see it's defaulted when your child is zeroed, it will be centered on its parent. And our ground check, we want to put it where our feet will be. So I'm just going to move this straight down right where the feet will be. Okay, right about there. It doesn't need to be perfect. We're just moving it down there because, again, it's childed. It will go wherever my player goes. Okay, so now I have a ground check. Let's go back to our code, and we're going to add what's called a ground check into the code. So we're going to need some brand new variables that we have never seen before. So this will seem like a lot, but bear with me here. So the first thing we're going to need is a bool. And I'm going to make it public just so we can see it. Technically, it doesn't need to be public at all, but we're going to make a bool. Remember, this can be true or false. Now, this often when we make bools, we make it kind of a statement. It's going to be called is grounded. Because it makes a lot of sense. It's going to return true when it is grounded. It's going to return false when it isn't. So this is a variable that only has two outcomes, true or false. And this works really good for logic. I am going to set this by default to false for now. Okay. And now we're also going to need to reference that ground check. So I'm going to say public, and this is going to, that ground check, I want to reference its location in Unity, which is called a transform. So I'm going to reference that transform, and that's just going to be called the ground check. Okay. And we'll do that in Unity after. We're going to also need a public float, and we're going to call this the check radius. You'll see why in a second. So don't forget to put that in. We don't need to give that a value at this time. We'll leave it defaulting. And we need one more, and it's called a public layer mask. Again, I'll explain what this is, and this is going to be called the ground layer. So in Unity, we have different layers in how we check our collisions with colliders. And we have, and this is great because sometimes you have an enemy layer, a ground layer, an interactable NPC layer, whatever that might be. But these layer masks allow us to have different things happen in our video game depending on what layer we are colliding with or overlapping with is what we're about to do. So we're going to do a ground check right up here. Or right down here in the update. Okay, so this is going to be a complicated line of code, but I'm going to show you what it looks like. It's called, we're going to be setting is grounded. Okay, that's currently false. There we're going to now create a check. It's going to return true if our feet are touching the ground, false if they're not. And what this does, how we do this is by drawing an invisible circle. So we're going to use a method called our physics 2D, and we're going to draw what's called an overlap circle. Overlap circle. Okay, so it's going to draw an overlap circle. It's going to check what does this circle collide with. So we need to actually put in three different things here. We need to add a location to draw the circle. So that's easy. That's going to be our ground check dot position. Now the position is the exact location of the ground check because the ground check was a transform, remember, which contains a position and a rotation and so on. But I want to keep this as simple as I can. So there's a location to draw the circle. And then we're going to add how big we draw the circle, which was the check radius. And then we also want to say, what are we actually checking if we collide with, which is going to be the ground layer. Whew. Okay, now that is what we need for a ground check line of code. So this is going to work right now. Well, sorry, it won't. We need to do a few things in the inspector. But we also need to add something to this if statement. So an if statement can check multiple pieces of logic to run the code. And the way we do that is a double ampersand. So it's going to check if, what that means is the jump button being pressed and are we grounded? So all we need to do is type in is grounded. So if this is true and the button's true, if we get true, true, it will allow our character to jump. Okay, so let's save this. This code is ready to go. We're going to have to do a few things in Unity to implement it, but they're not too hard. Let's go to our player, and we'll see down here, now we have a few more things. Let's just minimize the rigid body. We have a few more things here to deal with. We have a ground check transform. It's got none in it. We need to reference it. Well, that's why we made it. This child right here, I'm going to click and drag it right onto there. The check radius. Check radius, I'm going to recommend 0.2. That's a pretty safe radius. Again, these squares are 1 by 1, so 0.2. It just draws a tiny little circle down here. I could make it show it to us, but that's not necessary for what we're doing. Now the ground layer, when we set up a ground layer, we need to pick something, and nothing's called ground, so we're going to make a new layer. So we're going to go right up to here, we're going to go to layer, we're going to add a new layer, we're going to call this ground. Just press enter, and now we have a ground layer. Now I don't want to call the player ground, I'm going to call the ground ground. So now go select your ground over here, and over here on layer, if we want to change that to ground. And let's go back to our player and make sure the ground layer is checking the layer called ground. There we go. Now I know that was quite a few settings. Let's actually test this. Notice my is grounded is defaulted to false, meaning no check mark. Okay, so let's press play, and when I touch the ground, it should check. It should have a check mark once I land. There we go. So now I've landed. I'm moving left, I'm moving right. Okay, let's zoom out on my scene view here. I'm moving left, I'm moving right. And watch closely what happens to is grounded when I jump. It turns off. And now I cannot double jump. I can jump instantly as soon as I hit the ground. Okay, and you can see when I hold the jump, it's also it's having me auto jump. So that check radius might be a little bit big. Let's change that to 0.1. That's cleaner. Now you can see, if you can see that in my video capture, that it is jumping a lot more clean. Yeah, I like that. And now I can't double jump. I can't infinite jump. 0.1 is the way to go. I set that in test mode, so remember, go back and set that to 0.1 is a much better. All right. So we can jump now. We have a ground check. And now if you want, play around a little bit. Don't go too heavy into level design, but I can take this ground and I can go Control D to duplicate it, and I can move and create another piece. So I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to scale it down a whole bunch so it's a little platform, and then let's just put a few, whoops, I don't want to change that. And I'm just going to move them around my level a little bit. So I can quickly grab this and then press Control D. I can add another platform, Control D, maybe put one over here, maybe put one over here. Let's zoom out. And again, don't do too much right now. Let's move this one maybe up over here. And Control D, let's just make a few just so we can kind of play around with our level for now. So now when I press play, I'll have a little bit more platforms to play around with my jump. Let's see if can I make that jump. Oh, and I'm sticking to the wall. We're going to be fixing that shortly. We'll do that in the next video maybe, because I've done enough in this video. So can I get up there? Oh, nope. We're going to start the next video with a problem, but that's good. It's a super easy fix, and it has to do with a physics material where we need to control the friction. All right, that's it. That's all. We'll see you in the next episode.